So I'd like to call to order the school committee meeting of Lawrence Public Schools on January 19th, 2023. It's 5:36. And the first order of business, we're going to our superintendent finalist, Dr. Kathleen Lenox.
Yes, I do have an extra copy.
Yes.
I apologize. And also have your list of numbers.
We have one. Well, welcome, Dr. Provost. Thank you so much for being here on another beautiful Berkshire January day. We're glad to have you. I had heard wonderful things from all the conversations you had with folks today, and I guess we'll start by introducing ourselves. Need some sort of fun item to include. I think maybe we'll do favorite food today.
Okay. Favorite foods. My name is Bob Munch. I'm school committee. I have two kids who graduated from the district, and I have one in 11th grade. And my wife's chocolate chip cookies are the best I've ever had.
I'm Megan Kirby, school committee. I have 3 children in the school here at elementary school, and my favorite food would have to be Thai food.
Christine Morrow, nice to see you again. I met you at lunch this afternoon. I also have kids in Morris, two sons here at Morris. Favorite food is hard. I eat almost everything and consider myself an adventurous eater. I think I'm gonna have to go with the tried and true classic, which is Jersey Shore pizza.
I'm Bob Vaughn, school committee chairman. And I'm kind of partial to chocolate chip cookies, I guess.
You're
Or
welcome.
chocolate.
Dave Rimler, I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old son, and I'm teaching myself how to deep fry.
Okay. Okay. Veronica Benton, nice to see you again. 3 students who graduated from Lenox, and the youngest is 22, and I literally choose not to live without ice cream. My personal favorite is Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia, but local ice cream will always get me to walk there and get it.
I'm Warren Katz, school committee member, have kids in pre-K, 2nd and 4th grade here at Morris. And I am partial to a bagel with lox sandwich, but does have to be a Jersey or New York bagel. With respect to the Berkshire bagels, that
It's just not.
the same. It turns out it's the water. I don't know if you know this. but
I've heard that.
It's actually true. So that's a little bit about us. Really, everything you need to know about us.
Absolutely.
More maybe. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. Similar to the preliminary interview, but have you start with an opening statement, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your interest in Lenox. Residency is an important question for us. So what will your commitment in that respect and plan for sort of integrating yourself into the community. I think we have 9 sort of pre-programmed questions that we've thought about, and then do a little bit of a free-for-all toward the end. And then closing statement for anything you wish we'd asked and didn't.
Okay, sounds great. Can I just second, how's the hearing back there, everybody? Let us know.
Okay. So I'm Kathy Provost. I'm currently the assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and professional learning in the Hudson Public Schools. I'll start with my favorite food, so I can join the conversation. My favorite food is actually lobster. But I'm happy to know that you like chocolate chip cookies because I'm a very good baker.
I'll write that down.
Okay, yes, please. So it's a true honor and privilege to be here this evening. I want to thank you again for making me a finalist. I had an amazing day today. I visited with so many people. I asked 2 questions of everyone. I asked the same questions of every group that I was in. I asked them what they loved about working here or being in Lenox. And I also asked them what they thought their greatest challenge would be and how a superintendent might support that challenge. And I got amazing answers. And I know that anything that was asked, I could definitely fulfill. I've had a unique path to the assistant superintendency right now. I was a literacy coach before this role, and I've been in this role this is my 6th year now, in the assistant superintendent position. I was a literacy coach before that, and I coached for 8 years in K-8, K-7 actually. Before that, I was a reading specialist and a reading recovery teacher. And before that, I was a classroom teacher. I taught grades 4, grades 3, grades 2, and I had a little stint in kindergarten where I did kind of like a transitional kindergarten program where I was just working with some students who needed some extra help. So that unique role has actually led me to the place where I am today. I believe that instructional leadership piece that I had as a coach has actually led me to be an effective assistant superintendent, and I think I could be an effective superintendent as well. I know that I can make an impact in Lenox with what I have in my skills and my knowledge. I think a couple of things you need to know about me is I have 2 core values. And I have a lot of things that I live by, but these are the 2 core values that I live by all the time. One is that everything needs to be student-centered. When I coached in a student-centered manner. So if I coached a teacher, we would always look at what were students doing? How were students, taking the lessons that they were doing? And if they weren't successful, what could we do so that the student could be successful? But I think that that transfers to everything in education. I think we have to have a student-centered approach to everything, every decision that we make. The other thing that I think you need to know about me is I think it's extremely important for a superintendent to build relationships, to show that they have integrity, and they have to build trust. And I have done that in my district. I've been in Hudson for 18 years, and I have built relationships with every single person in the district. I know most of the teachers by name. I think a few of the new teachers that we hired this year, I'm still getting to know them. I know many of the students' names, almost all of them. So I get to know them, but I also work in a way so that they know that they can trust me with whatever decisions we've made for the district. I'm able to build capacity. I have been a professional development deliverer in my career. I'm sure you could see on my resume, I had many classes that I've taught. So I've been able to build capacity in that way. And I've also built capacity in our leadership team and in the instructional leadership teams that we have in each of our buildings. And I can talk about that later on. Why Lenox? I think one of the things you need to know about me is my husband and I are a military family. And my husband is retired military now. He served in the Army for 22 years, and we moved a lot. We've moved 11 times in our marriage, and moving is not a big deal to me. And my husband now knows that he's on my clock. When I found the posting for Lenox, I got super excited for a couple of reasons. Lenox to me is the epitome of the best district to work in Western Massachusetts. And that was confirmed today with all of the conversations I had with everybody. This is an amazing place to be. We drive through here quite often. I have 3 grown daughters who live in New York. So, to be even closer to them, to be in Western Mass and just be able to go 10 miles and be over the border, to get to see them would be a bonus. But that's not the reason I want to work here. From the conversations I had today, from the meetings that I had with all the people that I met with, I know that I could be your next best leader. I have staying power. I've been in my current district for 18 years already, and it is time for me to lead in a different place. That doesn't mean that I don't love what I do where I am, but it's time for me to be a superintendent. And I know that I can do a better job in a new district. I have fresh eyes, and I've done a lot of research ever since I knew I was a candidate here. All of the information that I've gleaned online and looked at all of the things you have, I know that I can take what you've already built and make it even better. I've done a lot of work with diversity, equity, and inclusion in my district. I have really learned how to be a strategic leader who learns how to use systems and structures effectively. So just for example, professional development, I have a professional development plan that I created for our district. We use the MTSS framework, which is multi-tiered systems of support. We use that when we are working on professional development and how we're placing students. We've also built very successful instructional leadership teams in each of our buildings, and that's something that I know that you have here as well. So besides what I can bring to the table, I also see very similar things when I compare Hudson to Lenox. Even though Hudson is pretty much 3 times the size of Lenox, you are either doing or have done or will be doing some of the same things that I can do. You have a strategic plan that I know that we can build off of, and the district improvement plan is one of those things that I know I can work on. So that's a little bit about me, and then. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with our question. First question. Have you had the opportunity to learn more about our district? What stands out to you as our unique assets and challenges? How do you see your particular skill set working effectively for us? And why do your skills match our needs?
So I think your unique assets are your teachers, your families. From what I heard today, families are super supportive of everything that happens in schools. Your teachers are world class. You have an amazing leadership team as well. So, it takes people to make a district work well, and I consider all of those people your assets. I think that the academic rigor that you have in all of your schools is phenomenal. You're not worried, I don't think, about your academics. I think, there are definitely positive things that are happening in your district that don't really need to be changed. I think we just need to make sure that we're continuing some of those same things that should be happening. I think one of the challenges that I heard today is potentially the lack of more of a system for like a district improvement plan. So a lot of people could talk about that strategic plan that you have, and it's a 5-year plan and it has a lot of good information in it. And I think one thing that I heard from people today was they wanted to know, like, how can we make those things actionable now? And so I have that experience, and I can help to build a district improvement plan that would be something that has strategic objectives, some strategic priorities, action steps, and some goals first, and then some action steps. And we could really look at how are we making sure that those things are working. I think another thing that is a bit of a challenge, and I don't think it's a big challenge, but I think it's a bit of a challenge depending on what group I spoke with today, is the feeling of belonging for some people. And it's more for students, I think, than anything else. I think some students don't quite feel like they belong. And that's, I think, just a climate and culture thing. And that could just be a result of, change in leadership and, the ability for kids to actually form those relationships with at least one adult in their life in school. But those are technical challenges, but sometimes adaptive challenges too, because we have to really make sure that people are recognizing that maybe some kids don't have that relationship or don't have that trusted adult that they can go to. So, I think that's a challenge, but I think that is something that, with professional development, with work, with the staff, I think we can definitely make that happen. And then my skill set, I think, building capacity, I think, is one of those things that I talked about. I lead by example. And so, one question that was asked of me today was, will you be a visible leader? And I did say, I absolutely love to go into classrooms. I think it's so vitally important for a superintendent to be visible, to know all of the staff's names, to know as many kids as possible, to know their names too, and know unique things about them. And so I have that ability. That is the thing that I live by. I think it's so important to build that those relational pieces with people. So.
What does good management mean to you? What is your management style and how will it help you be an effective leader, especially in a district of this size?
So I consider myself a transformational leader. And what that means to me is I lead with passion and I encourage people to come along with me. So when we look at, and I'll use the example of, we look at our district improvement plan. When we look at our district improvement plan and we have certain things on that plan that are new initiatives or new things that need to happen. If I'm one of those people that's leading that, I help people to understand the importance of it and like why it should happen and what's my passion for it. And then I help them to see how they can be part of that initiative as well. And that I think just builds capacity for the leadership team that I work with. I think as a manager, I think a manager needs to be open and honest and as transparent as possible so that people understand what the decisions are that you're making. And they also, if you have that trust built, they'll understand when you have to make difficult decisions that might not match what they thought was going to happen. And I think to be that effective leader, especially in this district, I think it's doable because it's not a huge district. Like I said, my district is like, we have 2,500 students. So we're much bigger, but we can still do that work. So I think it would be, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's definitely doable. And I believe that I can be that manager. Thank you.
Could you give a little bit more context on the management structure that you work within now? How sort of Hudson structures its administration and who you, if you have a team, how you connect other parts of the team?
Yes, so at the central office, we have a cabinet. So it's basically myself, the superintendent. We have an HR director, a finance director, and our pupil services director. So that's the cabinet that we work with. That group meets once a week, and then we disseminate information out to our departments. We also have what we call an Elevate team, and Elevate stands for educational leaders. I'm not gonna get the acronym correctly, but it's a group of people that is really basically all of our budget owners. But that group also works to create the district improvement plan. We do that over the summer. We usually have a retreat over the summer where we create the district improvement plan together, and then we bring it back to staff so that they can see, what we're working on, and then that's how the schools create their school improvement plans. So that team is one of those. An offshoot of that team, which is my team, is the curriculum instruction team. So that team actually is made up of the principals, the assistant principals, our curriculum directors, and the coaches that we have. We have instructional coaches at our elementary buildings, and we also have language acquisition coaches because we have a large Portuguese population. And so that team actually meets once every 2 weeks, and we're responsible for creating the professional development for the district. The nice thing about what we've been doing with that group is we have actually created capacity in our school ILTs. And we work together in the curriculum instruction team to actually give ourselves professional development so that they can take that information, and then the individual instructional leadership teams work in the individual buildings, and they deliver the professional development. So for example, over the last couple of years, we had a major focus on multilingual learners. And so the curriculum instruction team really learned as much as we could together so that we could actually teach each other, take that information, and then bring that back up to the schools. And then their instructional leadership teams are actually responsible for their professional development right now. So it's worked really well. And the same has happened with the other departments. They all have like their offshoots.
Excuse me, can you give us an example of an organizational change you made in the past? For instance, in the composition of your team and the role of responsibility. And the second part is, why did you make that change? How did you plan it? And what was the outcome?
I actually have two examples. I can give a short one and then maybe a
It is your
Would that be
time
okay?
here.
Okay.
That's, you know,
I think one of the smaller changes that we made when I first took my role. I was an instructional coach and I was coaching K through 7, but I was actually coaching a few different grade levels. And then I had one partner coach who was actually coaching some other ones. When my superintendent came on, we made the decision to actually create the role of an instructional coach at each of our elementary buildings. And that's not what had happened before. And it was met with a little bit of resistance from our coaches because, well, from our one coach, because I was moving on. We needed to hire somebody to fill my position, but then we wanted to actually hire another coach because we have 3 elementary buildings. The coach that I coached with was very reticent to do that. She really enjoyed the district look because she was in all 3 elementary buildings. She really felt like she was going to lose that district view. And like we really had to talk through what was bothering her and what did we think were going to be the benefits of having her just in one building instead. So we made that change. We hired one more coach to fill that third school. And I have to say today that that one coach that, had to stay in one building is happier than she could ever imagine. She feels like she's building capacity so much better. Now that she's in one school, she has much better relationships. I can be honest, like when I coached K through 7, I didn't have the capacity to be in there as many times as I should have been. But she's now realizing, and our coaches are the people that our principals go to all the time. So I think that's been an amazing change. I think the other example that I have is the curriculum instruction team that I was talking about. We were pretty much non-existent. I would meet with the curriculum instruction of the curriculum directors, but we really didn't pull other people in. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we had a team that we didn't have to give secondhand information to. And so we created that curriculum instruction team and invited principals and invited assistant principals and asked the coaches to come and made sure we have the technology director on that one. We have a different role called subject matter leaders. So our visual arts, our performing arts, and our wellness teachers. We have teachers who are actually subject matter leaders. So they serve in a curriculum director role, but they are they're on the teacher contract instead. And so all of those people actually now meet together. And so the result of that is that we have actually built capacity, like I said before, in all of our elementary buildings, or all of our buildings actually, to make sure that the instructional leadership teams are actually autonomous now and they can create the professional development that is just right for their own building.
Can I just ask one question? Because I want to make sure I understand the meaning of capacity in this. Can you just sort of give me a quick, just a little refresher on what it means to you and how I should be interpreting?
So when I say capacity for professional development, I see that our teachers in each building, when they're ready to, when they feel like they have enough skills to lead professional development, they can actually do that. They don't have to rely on a curriculum director. They don't have to rely on their principal. They don't have to rely on a coach to do that. We have a lot of people on our instructional leadership teams now that are raising their hand to actually to deliver professional development, and that didn't happen before. And I think we've created that trusting relationship and that we've given them the ability to grow as leaders themselves, and made it not so scary. We're not asking them to deliver PD across the entire district. It's just in their building where they have colleagues. So it's been a great experience. So I see capacity as like giving them the ability to grow and become even better than they were before.
Let me just ask a follow-up too. Your subject matter leaders,
Yes.
are they district-wide? So you've got somebody for English language arts who's a district-wide person, or
So our core content people are curriculum directors, and so they're administration. But our subject matter leaders are on the teacher contract, and they have smaller departments. And so they actually are across the district. So we have, wellness teachers, K to 12. So that wellness subject matter leader is the person who they go to when we have PD days or we have department meetings. So they don't have necessarily a department, like a curriculum director that runs that one, but they fill that role. And it's a stipended position.
And they're still in the classroom.
They are. This is an extra duty.
I'm up next, but I've been advised we have the camera pointed vaguely in that general direction. Want to see if we can rotate this cable somehow without breaking everything.
Your computer is on the crack.
I'm gonna see that's exactly the kind of breaking everything.
You want to slide this down that way?
Reach across. If Bob's arm is just long enough, man. Or maybe this will ruin
Yeah,
it.
yesterday was aiming right at me and right at.
No, other way.
Camera left.
I
Keep
don't know why
going,
I'm standing here. What do I know?
keep going. No. All right, we've done the best we can do. Everyone can hear.
Why another camera?
It says it is, but I don't know what that means. But everyone can see everybody and hear.
As long as people.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Another question related to management and leadership. We want to ask about is accountability. Love to hear you talk a little bit about how you go about creating a culture of accountability both for your own team and then how you think about ensuring that then carries forward to your team holding people accountable in the school.
Sure. I think it does stem, for me, it stems from the creation of the district improvement plan. Because I think if people understand what our goals are and what we need to do, then they know it's in writing, it's something that they have that they can look at. And so when we create that district improvement plan, we actually create it together. And I'm talking about the leadership team first. So that leadership team creates that. And if for some reason we aren't achieving those goals, then we're going to talk about like, well, what's standing in our way? How can we help you? What are those things that we can actually make sure that we can do so that we can actually achieve those goals? And sometimes we create goals that are not achievable yet. So then we have to take that step back to say, okay, what's a smaller step that we can do? I think we can hold our teams accountable using that district improvement plan. And also making sure that the school improvement plans match the district improvement plan in whatever way. And sometimes school districts will create a school improvement plan and then match that to the district improvement plan. But in my experience, we've created our district improvement plan first and then created the school improvement plans. So when our principals actually come with us in the summer, when we create the DIP, we give them some time to actually start to think about creating their school improvement plans, just as a skeleton, so that they can bring that back to their schools to, vet through their school councils and, to vet with their staff, just to make sure that it matches what they're thinking that they should be doing. I think that the other thing that helps us to hold people accountable is something that I think I mentioned at my last interview was a phrase called paint done. And so in our leadership team, we read a book by Brene Brown called Dare to Lead. And one of the things that she talks about is making sure that people really understand what you're asking them to do. And so like she calls it paint done, because you want to be able to paint it. You want to be able to see like exactly what it should look like when we're finished. And so when we first created our district improvement plan a few years ago, it was a little fuzzy because we had changed the structure. It was, something that we had not done with the previous superintendent. So this was a new structure for everybody and people weren't quite sure, like, what does that mean? How are we creating this action step? How do we make sure it's actionable? And so we had to really work a lot on really doing that paint done. How does it look? What does it sound like? What should it look like when it's finished? And so we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years, doing that work. And I have to say that these last 2 years, even despite COVID, we've had so much great feedback from our leadership team saying that this was the easiest thing for them to do because they understood exactly what the structure was going to be like. And then they knew how they could actually accomplish the goals. So I think, it does start with that. It starts with that, a plan that people can actually understand and follow, and then following up with them, and then, giving them support. So if there is something that's on a school improvement plan or a district improvement plan that isn't attainable right now, for whatever reason it might be, we have to talk about why it isn't. And then, what could we do? How can we help you? How can we help you achieve that? And if not, how can we push it off if we can, and if we can't, what else can we do? And I think the other thing about accountability and, I think it's an aside from that is, the teacher evaluation system. I think that does help us to keep some kind of accountability, and we also use that with our principals too. So using that as, a guideline also, when we think about the rubric and we think about how, where, when somebody creates their professional goals for the year, we want to be able to kind of refer back to those and use that evaluation system to help us hold people accountable as well.
Is there a through line from district improvement, school improvement to the teacher goals? Are they trying to connect those to the school goals?
They are. So that has been a work in progress. I would say probably the last 2 years. The through line, for the last 5 years, I think the through line for the DIP and the SIPs have been pretty clear. The through line through to the teacher's goals has taken a little bit longer. But I think we've accomplished that because we've had, especially in our district improvement plan under the professional development piece, when we've had our multilingual learner PD, and we've done a 2-year process of that. Teachers are starting to see that, oh, I can do a professional learning goal and a student learning goal that actually matches the SIP because it's right there. So we want that to happen. We don't want them to create something different. We want them to use what we're already working on in the school.
On that, I have a question, but before I get to that, as a follow-up to what you said, so in your capacity in 18 years or so at Hudson, have you, maybe you've already answered this, but I just want to get clear, supported building administrators, principals, and assistant principals in their role of evaluation? Have you, they have to learn how to do a really good evaluation. So what has been your process with that?
Right. I'm not directly involved with what the principals do because the superintendent is actually evaluating them. But we do have lots of conversations around how they can do walkthroughs and really look at what are they seeing when they're in classrooms. And so it may be tied to the evaluation system, but we're also trying to keep it separate for a little while because walkthroughs are a little bit of a I wouldn't say they're a new phenomenon because they used to do them years ago and they weren't received well, but we're calling them learning walks. And so in my capacity, I've actually been really working with them. We have a consultant that we're working with for the ILTs. And so we've been doing some very clear walkthroughs with the principals. And we go in, we talk about what are we expecting to see when we walk into that classroom? And then what are we seeing? And then what kind of feedback are we actually going to give that teacher? So we will go in, we'll leave a note for the teacher just saying, thank you for inviting us into your classroom. We'll come back out. We'll talk in generalities about what could the principal actually say to the staff? We saw, these great things happening in our building today because we don't want to single people out in those learning walks. We want these to be educational and, ways that the principal can actually use those eventually in evaluation. But we want the principals to build capacity and how to give actual actionable feedback to teachers that is something that they can actually do and improve on. When we use the evaluation system as just a gotcha, it's never going to work. And so we're really trying to make sure that teachers see that evaluation system or the learning walks as a great way for principals to build relationships with them, and also to give them some kind of feedback that would help move their learning forward, their pedagogy up a little bit.
Do your learning walks include teachers or is it just administration?
So right now, they just include the administration, because we're really trying to make sure that we're calibrated well. Our plan is to include, and I think at one of our schools, they've kind of gone ahead a little bit because they're a smaller school. They've kind of done some of this work already, and so they are starting to include their members of their instructional leadership team. And they're doing that same kind of work. It's not happening in all buildings yet. But our hope is that it will, because we see that when teachers can give each other feedback, that's going to be much more powerful than I'm going to, put this in Teach Point and call it a day. And then I think something else that I've been working on with a lot of the people in my district right now is we have been participating in a monthly series with Kim Marshall. So he produces the Marshall Memo. And he's been doing a series on teacher evaluation. And so one of the things that he always talks about is really walking into classrooms multiple times. And I think his is 10, like, you want to be in classrooms multiple times before you're even putting anything into the evaluation system, right? You need to get to know them because they might have a bad day. They might have a stellar day, but like, what are the ways that you can actually calibrate and say like, okay, this is about where this teacher is. And so that work has really solidified the learning walks that we're doing as well. And we plan to bring that back out to the staff eventually, and then to teachers. So we actually asked a couple of union representatives to be in that professional development with us too. We had started the work with Kim Marshall before COVID hit, literally January of that same year. So we had to postpone all of that, but we wanted to resurrect that because teachers aren't thrilled with our evaluation system. Our principals aren't either, and we really want to build a real capacity of teachers. We want them to be the best they can be, and we have to find a different way to do that. So that's what we've been doing.
Have your ILTs, are the ILTs something that have they been around for years, or is that something that's come in the years you've been in your role?
Just the years that I've been in my role. When the superintendent came on, he had already worked with the company that we had hired. And he gave me the lead to be kind of like that lead person to work with the consultant that comes in. So it's really been the last 5 years that we've worked with her. And it's made a world of difference already. Sure.
Well, you may have touched on a few of these things, but this has to do with broader professional connections outside of the school community to broaden your network and scholarship. If you could discuss some ways in which these networks have guided your leadership. And again, you've already said, come here, you'll be in a whole new community. What ideas do you have about how to connect professionally across the region, the county, state?
Sure. So I hear that the superintendents in the Berkshires all get along really well. So I think that is an important thing because I think it's very important to have the connections within the county as well. I am a member of the Mass Association of School Superintendents. And I've been a member since I became an assistant superintendent. So I rely on the professional development that I get from them. I attend the summer conference that they hold every year. They also have a midwinter conference that's coming up. So I have that connection as well. I have several superintendents and assistant superintendents that I work with that I kind of collaborate with around a lot of different things. One example is for the ILTs, we actually collaborated with another district who was also working with the consultant that we had, and we did a lot of visits across districts. So, we took our leadership team to their district and they brought theirs to our district, and we did some walkthroughs and all of that. So that was phenomenal. So I definitely reach out to, my colleagues to do that. I do a lot of reading on my own as well. I'm a geek for like all kinds of new learning. So I definitely, want to build that capacity for myself, but I recognize that I really need to also reach out to the superintendents in the area. Because this is a unique area and I would need to learn a little bit more about here.
This might qualify as hearing the witness, but I heard you speaking earlier today about your relationship with your current superintendent
Mhm.
and the mentorship that he's provided. And I wanted to ask a little bit more about that and sort of what stood out to you about the way he does the job and what you would want to take from it.
Sure. I believe, and I'm being truly honest, that he is probably the best superintendent that is in Massachusetts. He has been an instrumental leader in Hudson. Before that, he worked in Worcester, the Worcester Public Schools, which were 10 times the size of Hudson. And he brought with him all of those systems and structures and all of the things that I've learned from him that have made Hudson successful right now. Hudson, like I told you, we had, I'm not sure if I mentioned in the last one or this one, but I've had 6 superintendents in the last, 18 years now. And he is one of the only superintendents that has actually been that consistent leader that has really helped us to build capacity for our teachers, to make sure that we have those systems and structures in place that are going to make sure that Hudson can be sustainable, no matter who the leader is. And so what I appreciate most about him is from day one, he has included me in everything he's done. So he has been my mentor from day one. And I told him recently, I said the first day was like drinking from a fire hose because he just gave me so much information that I was like, I don't even know if I can do this job. But he's mentored me. He's really convinced me that I can actually be a superintendent now. I can't thank him enough for the work that he's done because he has been instrumental. He's had to make a lot of tough decisions in our district. And I've watched how he does them. And I know that I am a similar leader to him. Like he never raises his voice, never gets upset. Like he has such a way of explaining and making sure that everybody really understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I believe I'm that same kind of leader. So I appreciate him, and I know he'll be retiring as well, but I have him on speed dial, so.
How do you cultivate the next generation of teacher leaders? You've kind of touched on this quite a bit in your answers about capacity building, but explain what you've done to improve performance and make superior staff out of average performance.
So it's gonna sound redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that instructional leadership teams have been instrumental in really making sure that teachers see themselves as leaders. And that doesn't mean that they, have to move into a leadership role, but they do feel like they are leaders in their buildings now. They are raising their hand to lead professional development. They are coming to common planning times. And actually getting so much work done in like the 40-minute block that they actually have to plan together. And that didn't happen before. They, they're so busy, like they have so much work to do that those common planning times used to be like, okay, like what's happening for field trips and who's copying this work and what's happening. And they see their common planning times now as vital time to look at student work, to make decisions as a team, to think about what their next steps are as a team. And so to me, that's leadership. When you can lead your team together, that's leadership. And so, I credit the instructional leadership team philosophy and the work that we've been doing together to help them do that. I also credit our instructional coaches at the elementary level and our language acquisition coaches that we have at the middle school and elementary and high school. They also are leaders in their own right. Coaches fit into a very strange place in education right now. They aren't administrators. They are in the teacher's contract, but teachers sometimes don't see them as that. And so they do step up as leaders. And I work weekly with all of my coaches. I think it's vitally important for somebody to be their sounding board. And they don't tell me specific information about anybody. But if they have a problem with, like the coaching a grade level, they might come and say in generalities, like, I'm really struggling with like this kind of thing happening. And so, I'm helping them build their leadership capacity, but I'm not telling them what to do. I pride myself in asking questions, probing questions to get them to kind of discover it on their own. And they have become the most amazing leaders in their buildings. Their principals rely on them for almost everything. And in a good way. Teachers don't see them as like going to tell the principal on, something that somebody saw in a classroom. They rely on them, and then the staff sees them as vital too.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? And I'm gonna look a little to the audience, because I'm just not 100% sure. I think we get coaching in math and reading in the elementary level. So we are not a district that has a lot of coaching. So when you come in, and if you come in and think, okay, I don't have a team of coaches to work with, how do you move learning in the ways you describe without that layer? We're small, we're lean, you may have heard that already.
Right. And of course, I was a coach, so I see coaching as vital. And at the same time, I see that you can build the capacity of teachers to coach each other. So I don't see that, I think that coaching is vital. And I think that what we have in Hudson, I don't think we could live without our coaches anymore, because we've had them for so long and they've done such amazing work. And I think we could build the capacity of our teachers to see themselves as coaching each other too. Our CPTs, like our common planning times, when teachers are getting together, in effect, they are coaching each other. If they're looking at student work together, and a teacher's like, well, I see that your students are doing this and my students aren't doing this yet. How did you do that? That's coaching. So, I think we can build that coaching capacity with teachers in different ways. I don't think it has to be a coach per se, but.
I am mindful of time, but I have another follow-up question, because it's specific to what you're talking about.
Sure.
Have you experienced times when sometimes teachers, I don't think it's necessarily a negative, but they take pride in what they do. We have a lot of teachers who they're the only teacher that teaches a certain subject or a certain grade. In the elementary, we have typically 3 sections, but this concept of kind of sharing what you're doing can sometimes, and you said Brene Brown, and I read a list of Brene Brown, but put you in a vulnerable position.
Sure.
So do you see yourself also having to build that capacity where people can kind of show their work? I mean, I think that's hard for some people
It is.
unless you really have built that.
Right. And you can't build it unless they trust. So, they have to trust that when they're open and they share what they're doing. And even if it's a small incremental thing, something tiny at first to get them to share, and they get great feedback about that, it kind of builds their ability to say, okay, I can actually share a little bit more and a little bit more. And so I think, encouraging them and really praising the great work that they're doing, and making sure that they're seen. I think that can kind of go a long way to get them to kind of open up a little bit more. But, unless you've built that trust with them, and that they know that you're not going to go anywhere else with that, then they will share it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Next, if you would tell us about your experience working with curriculum, for instance, assessing curriculum in place, identifying a need to revise curriculum or implementing new curriculum. What did you learn from such experiences, and how would you use what you've learned? So
I'll start with when I was a coach, and then kind of build into something that's kind of happened now since I'm an assistant superintendent. So probably about 8 years ago, we realized that our curriculum, our ELA curriculum at the elementary level, was not getting the gains, not showing us what we really needed to see from our students. We were using an anthology program. Not all teachers were doing it the same way. People were kind of making up their own lessons. So we really didn't have like a curriculum that everybody was relying on to kind of do the work that they needed to do. So we put together a literacy leadership team. And so that team worked with myself as a coach, the assistant superintendent at the time, And then we had a couple of consultants that had come in that we were kind of looking at replacing that anthology program with the workshop model, which is really like a model for teaching reading and writing. And it was going to involve a lot of professional development and all of that. And so we realized that we needed to kind of make that change, but we also needed to have the onboarding for the teachers that were not on that literacy team. So the team consisted of at least one member from each school from each grade level. So it was a fairly decent team, but it was just enough for us to make some decisions and then have them go back to their teams, talk about what we were talking about, and then kind of come back to the team so that we could make the decisions of where we were going to go. So that was a long process. It took us probably about 6 months to get people to really think about, like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to roll out that professional development? How are we going to ensure that that it was going to stick? Because we didn't want it to go the same way as the anthology program where people tried parts and didn't do other things. And so, we actually enlisted the help of the consultants that we had kind of hired to help us think about going towards the workshop model. And then they came and did a lot of professional development that worked exclusively at the elementary level so that they could kind of go into classrooms and show how it would work. They would model lessons and then, we'd come out and debrief. So we did that for about 3 years to make sure that it kind of stuck. So fast forward to now, my math director last year said, the program we're using in math is just not working at the middle school level anymore. It's like the teachers aren't thrilled with it. Our MCAS scores aren't great. We just really need to do something else. So he said, what has been done in the past? How can we make sure that this will be something that will be viable and will work? And so I described to him the situation that we had with the literacy leadership team. And he took pretty much everything that we talked about and created a math leadership team. And they piloted a few programs. Last year, they piloted, I think, 3 different programs, and then got feedback from all of the math teachers at the middle school, feedback from the principals, actually looked at, what was happening with the students at home, because parents were also complaining about the math program that we were using because it just wasn't fitting. They had no idea how to help their kids. And so they actually settled on a new curriculum that they started this year. And because of that buy-in and the work that we did, or he did with that team, it actually is going really well.
Was your the workshop model, is that the Lucy Condrens?
Yes.
And did you send people to Columbia or anything like that, or did your consultants have enough expertise that?
Right. We didn't send people to Columbia. We had a couple of reading specialists who went on their own. We paid for their PD, but they wanted to go on their own, but we didn't send them to Columbia. The consultants that we were working with at the time had developed their own reading units that were workshop model, and we adopted the Lucy Hopkins writing units at that time. And since we stopped using those consultants, a few years ago, we actually switched to the Lucy Hopkins reading units because we saw, they were fitting better, they were matching better across reading and writing. So.
Hey, so I'm gonna adapt this a little bit because you've talked a lot about, shifting into district-wide, but teaching at the high school level, and I think you've always heard us talk about pride and high-quality instruction. Can you talk a little bit about your skills and ability to support instruction in the high school that invigorates and really enlivens all learners? Everybody can really get excited about some things that are happening. Can you talk about that specifically a little bit at the high school?
Sure. So I think my experience of just the curriculum at the high school level comes through my curriculum directors. Like I said, we meet weekly, so I hear about everything that they're doing with their departments. Whether they're trying new curriculum, in math or they're developing some programs with their teachers. They definitely share a lot of the information or all of the information that is happening in their departments with me so that I can kind of just keep up to speed. We have very talented teachers in our district as well, who do develop some of their own curriculum. Some are, some are pulling lessons from like Amplify or some other places, but we do have people at especially at the high school level that are kind of creating their own. And I think when they have passion for the subject that they're creating, as long as it's matching standards and it's going to meet, the graduation requirements, we encourage them to do that. And our curriculum directors are the ones who kind of oversee that to make sure that that is happening, that it's meeting graduation standards, but it's also following the passions of what that teacher is teaching. Because we know that if the teacher's passionate, they're actually going to be able to, really put some life into the curriculum itself.
And again, we have no curriculum director here, so
I know.
there's gonna be some real, so you feel comfortable that with that conversation directly with the faculty to
Mhm.
ensure that we're really meeting the needs of all learners.
Yes. So I actually had a little bit of the conversation today with the high school teachers. They came up a little
Anything
bit.
you can share without, don't have to,
No, all good conversations.
yeah,
But I think they take great pride in the work they do as well as they should. And I think, making sure that we're following the standards, that it's meeting graduation requirements, like we have to make sure that's happening. I think one thing that I might want to add is, one of the ways that we're actually shifting some of our curriculum at the high school especially is we're making sure that it's meeting diversity, equity, and inclusion standards, right? Because like some of the texts that we might have been using in ELA years ago aren't really meeting those needs anymore. And so, we're having those conversations with the teachers to say, what other book might we be able to use if we're going to do that novel study? Or, what writing prompts might we give so that it's actually, meeting the needs of all of the kids that are in your classroom. So I think, having those conversations today really helped me to see that, there is great pride here. And I think that I can't wait to dig in a little bit more to see what they're creating and, just kind of have those conversations, like curiosity, like how did you come up with that? Why, where do you see that meeting the standard? How is it making sure that we're meeting those graduation requirements? So,
The NEASC accreditation
yes,
cited curriculum as an area that needs.
here,
Yeah, the articulation of curriculum across grade
Okay.
levels and codification to some degree of that curriculum. So that, people know what's common, what's ahead. Is that articulation of curriculum across grade levels, is that something you've been involved with?
yes. So again, it's working with the curriculum directors who are K-12 curriculum directors. So they really are overseeing, that vertical alignment across all grade levels. So for the most part, I don't think we've had an issue with that vertical alignment happening. Our teachers have, especially at the high school, a lot of our teachers have been there for a long time. We have a math program pretty much at the high school, so that I would exclude that. But for social studies, ELA, science, we have some programming too. But we're definitely looking at that vertical alignment.
I want to follow up on Ronnie's question just a little bit. In your role as the assistant superintendent, what is your contact with the high school been in terms of, discipline, budget? And my next question is about budget. Too.
Okay.
Budget, improvement of the school, scheduling, things like that. How much exposure do you have with that?
A lot. So because I work very closely with all 5 principals, we meet once every 2 weeks, I believe. So, I hear a lot about what's happening at the high school always. I also meet with, obviously, the curriculum directors to look at curriculum, but I meet with we have a new guidance counselor at our high school. So I've kind of been her mentor this year. So all that scheduling and all of those things that are happening there, we have conversations about that. Scheduling at the high school is always crazy. We use a different system than you use. And one thing that we've really thought about in Hudson is we sometimes almost have too many electives that create an issue with being able to fulfill everybody's wishes. And when you have too many, you have too many one-offs. So, that's one issue that that has been raised by our principal at the high school. And just thinking like, can we kind of stagger when we offer certain classes, so that we're making sure that we're still offering them, but maybe we're offering them in every other year, or, every other semester maybe. So that's one thing, so, but I definitely, I'm in the high school. I try to be in all schools every week. Don't always make it every week, but I definitely try to be there so that I can kind of see what's happening in every school. It's great for the principals to share what's going on, but I think, you can't really understand until you're actually going in there and kind of living next to them, so. And we've been doing a lot of work with those learning walks too at the high school.
So my next question is the official question.
All right.
What is your experience with preparing budgets and how do you set priorities during the budget?
All right. So when my superintendent came 6 years ago, he brought a concept that nobody in my team or nobody in my district had known about, and it was zero-based budgeting. And it was a really hard experience for everybody for the first couple of years, because in true zero-based budgeting, you are basically saying to everybody, you don't have a budget yet. You now have to build a budget based on your needs. And so that was hard for people because, many people were very used to just having like, I have $10,000 for books. That's what I want. I still want that, right? But do you need all of those books? So it was a very interesting process the first couple of years, because people were like, I don't understand why we're doing this. Why don't we just, meet with you individually? But what we do in Hudson is we base our budget meetings off of our district improvement plan. So basically the same people who are creating that district improvement plan are the budget owners. And they are the ones who are kind of looking at what are the priorities that we have in the district improvement plan. And when we come to the table with budget requests and everybody fills out a budget request form, they look at, what do they think the needs are going to be for that year? We ask them to justify it based on the dip. And so when they justify it based on the dip, we then say, okay, like now we have to prioritize, because obviously everybody's still asking for a lot of things, but now as a team, we are prioritizing. And so what we've done these last couple of weeks, actually, we've had our second prioritization session where we have way too many asks for personnel and materials and things like that. And so our finance director said, here's the bottom line. This is what we're getting from the town. This is what we believe we can afford. So now as a team, we need to prioritize. And we need to think about what are the most significant needs that we have that are actually going to fit in that budget. But by doing it in the zero-based budget fashion, I think it really gives everybody that ownership of their budget, but it also gives them that empathy and compassion for what didn't I know before? I didn't know that, the EL department has this many more students in it now. So we actually might need another EL teacher. Or I didn't know that, we've been not, we have a new math curriculum that we have to purchase for next year, because we got a grant last year, but now we need to purchase it for 4th grade and 7th grade. So now we need to think about, how are we going to prioritize other things so that we can actually purchase those books, so that we can make sure that we can sustain that program vertically too. So the budgeting process has been a learning curve. It's much better. I think everybody understands the process now, and I have not experienced budgeting any other way. I know there are other ways to do it for sure, but it's the way that I know, and I think it's been very successful for Hudson.
The team that's making those priority decisions, what is that team again? Is that the DIP team, or that's?
It is the DIP team, so it's that Elevate team. So it's the team that actually needs to plan the district improvement plan in the summer. They are basically all of the budget owners. So it's, it's principals, assistant principals, finance, facilities, all of those people that actually have a budget. So they all come together and do that prioritization.
Should you speak a little bit to grants? Because I've had the benefit of hearing from you and hearing a little bit more, and I have heard about your focus on grant writing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm kind of a geek. I kind of like to write grants. Not everybody does. I write the standard grants for, the federal grants. So I've written Title I, Title II, Title IV. Our EL director writes the Title III grant, but, we collaborate on that. I've written several grants for additional PD. I've written grants for additional materials. So, I'm always looking on Desi's website to see like what's coming up next and do we qualify and what can we, what do we think we need it for? We supplement a lot of our budget with grants and I'm proud of that fact because I feel like when we can supplement with a grant, we can actually use that money that was supposed to be targeted for something else in a different way. And so again, I'm kind of a geek. I like to write them, but I think I'm pretty good at them now. I think I probably have a track record of maybe 95%. So, yeah.
Thank you.
We'll retroactively declare the grant question the start of the free for all.
Okay, there you go.
So we're now squarely in the middle of the free for all portion.
It's a budget follow-up, actually.
It could be a budget follow.
It's a budget.
Did you
enhancement.
want it to be part of it? It's up to you.
Sounded like it to
I'm
me.
kidding.
All right.
Just felt like it's time for a little levity. That's all.
I mean, I think it's been a terrific discussion. We've covered an awful lot already. We have a few minutes if folks have anything else they wanted to touch.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a little bit about, could you share your thoughts about non-college pathways for learners who might decide not to go to college, traditional four-year college?
In Hudson, we actually have a couple that can be considered non-college or college pathways. So one pathway that we've developed is a medical interpreter program. And so because we have such a high Portuguese population, we have a lot of heritage speakers. And so our world language director kind of saw that need of, we need to actually give them a skill and something that they can actually fall back on if they did decide not to go to college. And it's, totally fine for them to not do that right away or not. And so they actually get a certificate at the end of completion. So they have to actually take a test and become that medical interpreter. And a lot of our students have, when they've actually taken the test, because they take the test in some national center, that actually tests for us. And a couple of our students have actually been hired kind of on the spot to be medical interpreters right away. So I think, when we think about non-college or college pathways, I think we really need to be addressing the needs of what our students want to do. And I think if we really think about asking them and saying, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I think we're going to find a lot of kids who want to do something different. An example of, one that I know of is one of our principals had an interesting conversation with a parent who was so upset that their child wasn't going to college, that they wanted to go to an automotive school instead. And, they knew that this child was so passionate about automotive tech and, just really wanted to kind of encourage that. So the child actually switched to another high school so that they could kind of pursue that. And the parent eventually came around to say, okay, you're right. Like, this is what this child's passionate about. This is what they need to do. And I know, we might not necessarily be able to create those kinds, but I think we really need to think about, like, what do students want to do? And I also, I guess I kind of almost wonder, I'm kind of curious about, are we thinking about, or are you thinking about pathways that will kind of keep students here when they either graduate from high school or graduate from college and want to come back to live here? And so, can we think about some of those pathways that might actually entice them to come back to Lenox too, so that we can have them have children and stay here and grow our population again.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
I don't want to interrupt. No. So, a little earlier this evening, you had, I believe you sort of indicated that, one of your goals would be to, you made a comment about what we built here and, you'd like to make it better. And so I was kind of curious, what were those things you were thinking about that, that we have done that perhaps you feel you could build on?
I think one actually kind of goes to that pathways piece, right? Where, you know, like you have amazing things that are happening in your high school already. And what are those extra things that we could potentially do? One of the things that we talked about, even in the pathways that we have in our high school, we started to look at what classes could we bundle so that we could actually give them maybe a certificate or, you know, something that actually just gives them a little bit of a leg up to say, oh, like, you know, like for the medical interpreter program, we bundled like a world language class with a PLTW class, which is Project Lead the Way, for forensics, right? And so like we bundled a couple of things so that it gives them a little bit more experience and actually gives them a pathway that they can say, oh, maybe I want to go to college for that, or maybe I want to become a medical interpreter, or maybe I want to do something else, or maybe I don't, right? So I think, you know, that's one thing that I'm curious about. I would love to see if, you know, there are ways to even bundle classes so that you can see, like kids can almost see a different pathway.
We'll follow up on my budget question.
Okay,
I did forgot to ask you how much the budget is.
how much of the,
What's the dollar amount for the budget?
in Hudson? I believe right now, bottom line is 42 million.
About how long in duration is your process to start working on the budget in earnest and getting it to the town?
It's enduring. I think the actual meetings that we have, start in December. And then we have to give it to the town by middle of March. Sure. But we do start talking about it probably in the summer.
I'd like to ask, do you want to go?
Oh, I just want to ask one more question about culture, and I think you've mentioned sort of culture and climate is one of the areas that we heard about, some of the challenges that we have. And just curious to ask, you know, as you think about kind of an entry plan almost where, you know, it's culture change is a process, but day one is an important day in that process. So I was curious to hear your thoughts about what does that look like in your mind on day one?
So I think really thinking about like a day one and day, you know, several days after, I think it's important for a new superintendent to come in and have meetings almost like I had today, but more detailed, more time with people. I think it's going to be vitally important for a new superintendent to really think about meeting with as many people as possible to get a true sense of where everybody thinks climate and culture is. That being said, I think it's important for a superintendent to also think about like what's the cultural competency of the district. And so when I think of cultural competency, I think about like understanding people from other cultures, being able to communicate with them, being able to kind of work with them and help them understand your culture too. And that's not just somebody from a different country. That could be, you know, a student who maybe is gay and has not come out to anybody yet. So, you know, or, you know, like there's a multitude, there's a lot of different, you know, different makeups or different, there's a lot of diversity is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's so important for the new superintendent and everybody to really be thinking about like, how are we going to create that capacity for everybody so that everybody's understanding everyone else. And that we can think about how we're going to create that together. And it's not just going to be a top-down, hey, here's this professional development, but how can we create that true culture in each of our buildings? And also at the central office. I think, you know, I think everybody has to work together to really be thinking about like, how are we creating that cultural competency for everyone?
Yeah, just it's part of what you said. So I think you can dig a little more in that. So give maybe some examples of some ways. I'm aware that you were part of the curriculum that you had in Hudson Choose Love, I think it was called.
Yes.
So I don't know, if you want to talk about that, if you want to just talk about hearing from people, I think is great, and then sort of next steps, thinking about accountability for bullying. You know, I think you're aware that we've had some strong concerns, and our students in our pre-work expressed a real desire to ensure that they're not going to have to continue to endure the types of bullying and stuff that they've been exposed to. So we have a real, I think it's an imperative that we address that for students and that they feel safe and welcome. And that everyone feels like they're part of this community in a welcoming way.
Right. And so we did talk a little bit about Choose Love. So Choose Love is a social emotional program that Hudson chose to adopt to help all students with their social emotional needs. And you know, we had really wanted to find something before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came, and you know, we had to really address some other burning issues that needed to be addressed. And so we put a committee together to look at different social emotional programs that were going to fit Hudson. And so we had presentations from a lot of different companies, and a lot of the companies had like very technical language, or you know, a lot of things that really weren't going to match the needs of the students that we have in Hudson. And so kind of almost at the very end of our search, like we really weren't, as a committee, we weren't finding what we really wanted to find. So I just happened to go online one night, and I saw Choose Love. And Choose Love is a social emotional program that was developed by Scarlett Lewis, who was one of the Sandy Hook parents. And so her son Jesse was killed in Sandy Hook. And so she worked with a bunch of teachers to create this social emotional program. And so we met with them. We had professional development by Scarlett Lewis and her team. And we launched that program this fall. And it has made a world of difference for the students and the staff in Hudson. And that's not to say that that program would be the right one for Lenox, but I think it's important that, you know, when you're looking for maybe a program or something that's going to help build that, you know, that capacity for teachers to be able to talk to students too in a different way. Choose Love does that for the teachers in Hudson. It's very simple language, but the lessons are they're grade level specific, and the impact that it's already had has been phenomenal. And one thing that I don't think I mentioned today, but it actually has an adult component to it. And I think that's so important for us to be able to really think about how can we also address the needs of teachers. You know, especially if teachers aren't aware that, you know, bullying is happening in front of them, or if they're not quite sure what that is. I think it's truly important for us to educate everyone around the issues that are around today. And so, you know, Choose Love happens to do that for us. And, you know, I can't be more proud of our staff for kind of introducing that and working with the children on that. And it's a free program. We weren't going for a free program, but it just happened to be free, and it's been amazing.
So it sounds like a great program. When you say it made a world of difference and a phenomenal impact in a short time, how are you measuring this? What are the indicators that give you that impression?
So there are a couple of things. So the Choose Love curriculum actually comes with a pre-assessment. And then you can give that, you can give like an assessment kind of during the middle of the year. So some of our elementary teachers have done that pre-assessment of like, you know, where kids are. And then they've kind of done that assessment again, just to see like if there's a change or a shift. A lot of it is anecdotal. We are seeing students use the language of Choose Love. So they have 4 pillars. It's courage, gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion in action. And we have seen students, you know, kind of go up to, you know, another student and say, I'm really grateful for your friendship today. Or I'm really glad that, you know, you had compassion for me because I was really struggling with something. So our teachers are really seeing that. And the other thing that we know has made a difference is our principals, and even on PD days, the ILT teams are using a lot of the Choose Love materials with the adults. So the adults are kind of trying it out first, And then, they feel a little bit better about using some of the lessons and then they'll go back. What's amazing about the Choose Love program is it's all online, everything's done, the lessons are already done, they're already planned. There are books already there, like, so you don't even have to purchase the materials. They have people reading the book, so it was an amazing experience for us to go with, and we knew we needed something that was going to be quick and easy, that teachers didn't have to get a lot of professional development on, but we wanted them to have the right start, so that's why we actually pulled in the people from Choose Love to actually do the professional development. We felt like we had to launch it in the right way.
You're doing it K through 12?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think we've reached the end of our time. Do you have any final thoughts, anything we should have asked and didn't? Keep them back to you.
All right, well, I think you've asked me pretty much everything that I would have thought. I think what I want you to know about me is, if it didn't already come across, is that I am extremely passionate about the work that I do. I am in education for the long haul. I know that you've had some struggles, with multiple superintendents. I've lived that also, and I understand, how that is. I have empathy for that. And I would be more than honored to be your new superintendent, because I have fallen in love with Lenox. I really have. I've enjoyed every minute that I've been here. I have done a ton of research already, and I honestly feel like I'm not done. I was thinking about Karen Carpenter's song, "We've Only Just Begun." I know that's kind of corny, but if I were the new superintendent, I feel like I've only just begun. I know there's so much more to discover and to learn. And at the same time, I know I can do this job. I'm confident that I can do this job, and I would love to be here.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. It was nice meeting you all.
Thank you.
All right.
We will recess for 15 minutes.
We're going to begin deliberations on 3 candidates, and I want to once again thank our HR subcommittee who've brought these 3 candidates to us. We actually had 3 outstanding candidates. And I'll turn it to you, Heather Oren, who's got some suggestions for how we proceed.
Yeah, thank you. I think in addition to hearing from the candidates themselves, we've had the opportunity to speak with a number of their references that they've provided and others they've worked with our administrative team. And so I think adding that to the conversation would probably be helpful as a next step. So a couple of us have done the reference conversations on each candidate. And I would make most sense to go through those in the same order we spoke to candidates. So Christine and I, and for Dr. Collins and Christine, you want to talk a little bit about that?
I do. Okay. So Lauren and I had 4 conversations together with references for Bill Collins. And I have done my best to reflect those conversations. We'll share with you the takeaways, and Lauren will add anything at the end that I may have missed, and or to supplement what I've said. We spoke with, just for context, someone who in a supervisory capacity for Bill Collins, a professor at St. Lawrence University. We also spoke with a school committee chair and member from the last district where he was superintendent. We also spoke with a current superintendent of that district, who at the time Bill was there, was the principal, because somebody who had read the report who's now taken his seat. And also the BOCES superintendent, which is a concept in New York State that we are unfamiliar with here in Massachusetts, but it, as I understand in a very cursory way, represents a kind of a coalition of about 18 or 19 districts in its region. They provide some shared services in terms of financial or business system support to all of their participating districts. I thought what came through was actually highly revealing of Bill's professional character. We went into a lot of depth. There were many anecdotes and quotes that I will share with you. I think they're very revealing. I think sharing people's direct language actually helps get it and what they were saying and and really conveys vividly the message. So we heard a lot about his depth of experience and also, as I noted, his character. I was struck by the fact they were very consistent across the 4 references. We heard the same things repeatedly from people. There wasn't a lot of divergence. So they all converged and reinforced each other in commentary. And I would also say that was true from what we heard from Bill himself when he spoke with us in his interview. His references are very complimentary, and I would say I would characterize them as extremely strong. Here's a direct quote from one of the references. Our board never had a negative comment on any evaluation about Bill. There is very little to find fault with. There is nothing negative that really came through. We also made a point of asking if we do pursue hiring Bill, would you predict that there's anything that we haven't heard or haven't learned in the interview process that might come back that would surprise us in the future? And every single person said no, which is reassuring. All right, so strengths that were highlighted, which were numerous, I tried to categorize them according to a few themes that I thought were relevant for our purposes. One was proven turnaround ability. So Bill has demonstrated ability to rebuild or correct some big systemic problems and situations that he walked into professionally. First example of this was at St. Lawrence University, came in to run a graduate program in educational leadership that at the time had been found to not be serving the needs of the local schools. And as I understand, tenure was denied to the person who was previously running the program, so it was in a bit of turmoil or transition. We heard from the person who supervised Bill in that capacity that he did a great job of building connections, regaining trust, was able to lay a foundation for success. And he did this by actually tending to relationships and taking an interest in what others need, rather than what he thought, actually seeking out input from others and listening to that. There's a quote, he just did it. He picked it up and ran with it. He would take ideas and would go out and pursue them. And I thought that spoke to his independence, and the idea of pursuit of ideas came through to me. I underlined that in my notes. Second example of this, what I'm calling turnaround ability, we heard last night he had some opportunities where he had to manage out personnel who were not performing at a satisfactory level when he was superintendent. These came up in our reference checks. These issues were considered to be very public and at times controversial with very strong opinions from the community, sometimes students in opposition to the decision that Bill was making. In spite of this, he was able to handle all of that and take it in and still go through the process smoothly and with sensitivity and integrity. The school board was noted to be supportive and informed at all times of the decision, so knew what was going on. And everyone who commented on these matters said that they thought he was making the right decision. He was then, after sort of, going through having to exit individuals, he was noted to be actually very strong at recruiting and bringing on board great talent in the vacancies and helping support the people coming in. So another thing we heard about, I call culture building and leadership. Bill's individual onboarding when he took the superintendency of the prior district was noted to be very smooth. He set individual meetings with all kinds of different stakeholders. Quote here is, Bill is very passionate, but he doesn't want to step on toes. So I think that speaks to his measured approach and wanting to take in information before acting on it. We heard a few examples of how he repaired rifts in culture. There was an incident that also comes up on the internet. If you do a search around school lunches, which was posted on social media by a student who was very unhappy with the quality of the school lunch that he or she had been served. This was mentioned to be the very exact same lunch that the 18 or 19 other participating school districts also served. It just was that their district happened to be the one that got blasted onto social medias and held to account for this lunch. So this caused a kerfuffle and some discontent in the community and among the student base, but Bill was able to tackle it head on, meaning he listened, he recognized it as a problem, and he made himself accountable, convened a group and eventually resolved the issue. And reportedly now they actually have a chef in place. They stopped, this was the BOCES that sort of regional district had been providing. They pulled away from that arrangement and now have a chef who's responsible for their own district menu and lunches, and they have a farm to table program. So it sounds like it's much improved. He made himself the target, meaning that he I think as a leader sees his role is to sort of stand in front and take the fire rather than letting anyone else do that. From someone who worked for Bill, was noted not to be a micromanager, gives a lot of latitude and lets people make their own decisions about how to do things. I think we heard this last night from Bill, and we talked about capacity building. I think this is an example of that. Also to mention, to be very good at navigating a narrow political landscape in a tiny town. An example, I think some of the examples would apply to that statement, but another example that came through is that they were one of the few districts in the area to actually offer gender neutral restrooms. And another quote in support of this is he can talk anyone down. So he's not afraid of conflict and is able to come into difficult decisions and get through in a reasoned way. Also said to be very well connected with a wide network and lots of contacts we can reach out to. Final thing to speak through to was I thought just integrity. Some other words that might apply here too are respect, being finely tuned to timing as well as the needs of others. So coming through here with regard to letting go of one of the staff members who is about to get tenure, here's a quote. I was very impressed with how Bill held the line. I don't think many superintendents would have done this. And I wanted to work for him myself as a result. His door was always open. And this was a person who later became superintendent. After I took his job, I actually was very surprised by how much personnel work he had quietly handled behind the scenes. He left very detailed records. None of this was evident from the outside, but behind the scenes, he was actually really very much on top of things, very diligent and meticulous, and left copious notes when I transitioned into the role, which made it easier for me. His mindset is about sustainability. In terms of budgeting, he's only interested in budgeting what he thinks would be sustainable, and he's looking out not just to the one-year budget, more so longer term horizon over to the next 5 years. Not thought to be a big spender. Actually, another nice example of this budget conscious approach was that Bill and I repainted the gym ourselves during COVID when no one was in the building, and we were able to save the district $20,000. I also think that speaks to his, hands-on, roll up the sleeves, just get in there and get it done. Student survey reflects that the vast majority of the students, 94% of the students surveyed recently rated the administration as approachable and visible in the building. So students seem very happy with administration. He's said to have a great relationship with teachers, walking through the building every single day, saying good morning to everyone. Very pro teacher, absolutely not an autocratic leader. There was no regime in place, but instead he is thought to be a teacher's superintendent. Also called out as being innovative and willing to experiment. Example of this was mentioned that his district was one of only 2 districts who were able to pilot a program coming out of COVID, and I imagine taking what they had learned from COVID about how to do learning remotely. So now that they actually can do remote learning on snow days, so instead of losing an instructional day when the buildings are closed, they're actually able to deliver instruction remotely. One of only 2 in this group of 18 or 19. Also, his district was one of the highest performing in this regional grouping of 18 or 19, according to the BOCES superintendent. To end, just a few direct quotes, which I think are very telling. Bill is able to make courageous but unpopular decisions. Again, the unpopular decisions that we heard about were roundly supported by everyone we talked to as being the right decisions, or decisions that had to be made, although they were difficult. Bill is a really decent human being. One final note, I think in light of our particular circumstances and how we find ourselves in the middle of a school year conducting this search, Bill was very sensitive about giving notice to his prior board, and had such good relationships with the school board. He didn't want to leave anyone hanging, and the thought was he just really cares about the people he works with and the people he works for. And so he let us know about his departure and planned year on the sailboat as soon as he had his own plan, and gave us a full year's notice. So, questions, comments, additional?
That was way better than the summary I would have given.
I'm thinking, how am I gonna?
Yeah.
That wasn't meant.
Great, Christine. No, that's fantastic.
No,
Thank you.
I wanted to just toss in a couple of small things. One was echoing the point about the sort of what really came through was him being someone who really leads with integrity, you know, the quotes about, you know, he's the real deal, really decent human being, authentic. Was something that really roundly, not as a answer yes to a question about that, but that people stressed about him. The 94% of students was especially notable to me because it wasn't just like the students check off yes on everything. My understanding was that was the highest rated thing on the survey, was administration being visible and accessible in the building. And I thought a really cool anecdote that came with that was that one of the first things Bill did when he started in the district was actually ride all the school buses to see where all the kids actually live, and get a better feel for that, which really struck me.
And to just expand on that thought, my impression, I don't know, I'm sure, but that it's a really big district.
Yes,
where
yeah,
students
it's up at
providing
the border
really
with Canada, so there's a lot of different socioeconomic circumstances, broad geography, and that was for him.
So that was how he understood.
Understanding
students.
the district. And the last thing I thought stood out to me, just, you know, reference checks are usually positive, but people really went out of their way to make comparative points and say, this is one of the few superintendents I would want to work with. This is the best administrator I've worked with in, you know, decades and so forth. And the one other person we weren't able to talk to together, but I was also able to talk briefly to someone who was with him during his whole time in Southampton, which was kind of 2004 to 2013. He was the principal there, and echoed all of the same themes and said, you know, multiple principals since people still talk about when Bill was there. So.
And he had been nominated Thomas Passios Award, which is, you can get it, but that's for the outstanding principal in Massachusetts, elementary, but Massachusetts. Something.
So that is number one. Team LeBlanc.
Okay, why don't I start off? I did 3 and you did 3. Yeah.
Two were completed.
So the people I did, 2 of them were statewide system support people, and that's the group I used to work with. So they were colleagues. And what happens is the district gets into some status for whatever reason, and then say we're system support exam and offers assistance. Not every school district is as welcoming in that process as we work the statewide systems like. But what they said was, she was the one who got the door. I used to actually do work in that same district. Then they came out of status probably years ago, and now they're back, whatever status it is, but it was her, on her efforts they put in, because they had at the time a superintendent and the high school principal who maybe less less enthusiastic about that outcome. But she has developed a great relationship. My colleagues will go to every district leadership meeting and then they do follow-up meetings with her. We heard her talk about learning walkthroughs and that would be something that the team would have helped her, guide her through the first ones. She's doing them in 3 buildings now. And she developed capacity to do all the trainings herself. And that involves building trust among the teachers who are going to be observed. And then coming up with a focused inquiry, and there's a lot of steps to it. But one of the things she likes to own the processes that she's learning about, so that she can then pass them on and develop. And she develops her own capacity to do the work and then pass that on to the teachers and principals. She's done her one of the first big projects that she did was with math instruction team that she talked about. And again, she brought in another DESE colleague of mine who was the math specialist to help her with that. But then once she'd gone through that process, she led a similar process with ELA by herself. So she's learning. And the consistent message I got from all 3 people I spoke to was she just wants to learn everything she can. She's the grant writer for the district. She brought in the 3rd person I spoke to was the principal of their smallest school, the Chester Elementary School, and she said a lot of money has come in through grants. And I know Deanna talked about the entitlement grants, which are one thing, but the ones that you have that are competitive. She's also brought in a lot of money that way. Put students first, not what's best for adults necessarily. She's willing to step in. The principal said she's willing to work alongside you, willing to model, step in, and she'll do it with a smile. If you have something that one of her principals or any instructional situation that they want help, it won't be, I'll see if I can fit it in. It's always, yes, I'll help you. Does it with a smile. She's extremely receptive. She has a strong equity lens. In terms of things she might need to learn, she's great at self-teaching herself. Might be some legal stuff that she'd need to learn. Budgeting, she would have to need some budgeting assistance to get up to speed on that. She's great at giving constructive feedback. She's reflective. She's completed the Research for Better Teaching course on for administrators, and she's very reflective in her practices. Now, one of the people I spoke to, one of my former colleagues, was a superintendent, and also he was the leader of Pioneer Valley Statewide History Support Group for a number of years, and he said he would love to be able to put her in place of some of the current superintendents that he works with. She's got a lot of strength, and she also had to fill some gaps where the high school principal she filled some leadership gaps because she recognized some deficiencies, some areas that really were her total responsibility, but that she stepped in because they needed to be done. So those were the 3 that I.
Great. So, I'll share just some comments before I lose my voice. Full disclosure, sorry in advance. So similar comments I received from the 2 references that I spoke to, always going above and beyond, jumps into things eagerly, very student-centered, again, putting students before adults, passionate about education, empathetic ear, fantastic listener, a great trainer, very knowledgeable about process and learning, a money finder, again, with the grant writing, spent a lot of time talking about that, bringing a lot of money into the district. I did hear that she would need some assistance with budgeting initially.
Provost?
You wanna, what do you wanna do? You wanna go first?
We did it differently. It's interesting.
I know, it's,
We made our calls together, on a different approach.
Yeah.
Right.
All approaches are welcome.
So I had written in my notes just a couple of takeaways, and then I'll go down into the specific traits that a lot of the adjectives that I can focus on. So we spoke together with 6 references, and then Veronica was able to speak with the 7th, which and that I could not join that call. We found that all the responses were very supportive of her, and especially supportive of her seeking this position. Everyone spoke very highly of her there, and unreservedly supported her for this open position. A number of the things that they stressed were her coaching abilities. And it was a very common theme with everyone we spoke with. And a number of people had said to us that because of her coaching abilities and her reflective approach, that they themselves had become better because of their interactions with her. Little background on the district, which I believe she had spoken about. The district was characterized as dysfunctional, and to put it mildly, I guess. But there have been significant changes that had occurred over the last 6 years, and I think you heard today about her implementing some of those things that are somewhat basic to us, such as zero-based balance, zero-based budgeting, putting in a plan for professional development. These things did not exist in that district before, and she was instrumental in creating those programs, along, as she had mentioned, SEL in the end, and a curriculum review. So the basic feeling was that, and the consensus, that her role and participation in moving the district to part of a team under the leadership of their superintendent was very well regarded. She was a team member that added value to the community and was an instrumental member of it. I can go through some of the word clips that we took. Again, strong instructional leader. She increased the leadership role in the district. She maneuvers the politics of re-energizing that district very well. She brings the community together on initiatives. She's not an isolated decision maker, but she can make isolated decisions when needed. And she knits people together. Actually, I think she mentioned today she did backwards mapping with professional development with an end goal focus. She's going to follow up. She's loyal. She perseveres. General consensus where she's looking for a long-term position, and the direct budget experience. That there was a question about whether she really, how into the nuts and bolts she was. Again, excellent coach, good listener. She's able to strike a balance. She constructively engages with teachers, and she's highly organized. She's a stabilizing factor in discussions. She, when she originally came to the school, it was fragmented. She's considered a a change agent. She's driven, she's intuitive, she's sympathetic, she's open, she listens, she's reflective. She brings people in to assist when it's her. She's adaptive, she's visible in the classrooms. She understands the instructional aspect of school. She's true to the teachers. She uses a cycle of inquiry to figure out root causes. And that was a very stressed item. She makes people feel comfortable. She's a born teacher. Her coaching experience benefits the district. Another thing they said is during this period, when she was when she was elevated into her current position, no one knew really, except for a few key people, that she was following her, that she was pursuing her doctorate. And they stressed that, you know, she was always available, and at no time during that period did she beg off work because, you know, had to pursue her educational goals. I mean, I could continue along this vein. They said she has a thick skin, but in a very good way. I mean, I've got a couple more pages of this. So I think everyone kind of gets, other things that, that she was calm, and she's an active listener, non-judgmental. I don't sound like a broken record, but that's really the theme throughout all of our references.
I'll just add, I mean, I totally agree. We kind of took notes different ways. I did sort of the key takeaways and bullet points. I didn't, line them, but there's definitely a lot of consistency. But two of the reviewers who spoke with us spoke specifically about the issue of transition from assistant superintendent to superintendent, right? Like that in some districts, the assistant superintendent does their thing and the superintendent does their thing. But several addressed the fact that they felt she was ready to hit the ground running, that she had done all the things that she had done, had been side by side and very involved in the budgeting process, had been extremely involved in, and did mention grant writing, brought in an extra $700,000 in grant funds. So those would be the competitive grants in addition to the entitlements that you talk about. And that her way of leadership style and their partnership in Hudson, and she talked pretty eloquently about the superintendent, Marco Rodriguez, and what a great leader he was, and that his leadership style and hers melded because he brought her into leadership. Talked a lot about her doctoral process as well, and said it just lit her on fire with education, and in a way that she applied to her work in her growth, particularly in the areas that they needed in Hudson, and very much was focused on seeing what that community really needed. She spoke a lot eloquently about the language issues that were happening and how do they actually really grow that. And there was a lot of programs that didn't exist. And as David mentioned, a lot of dysfunction that was happening with turnover in leadership, but that she came in and really got, garnered people's trust. Some people spoke very emotionally about her, bringing one person that we spoke with, who was the assistant director of student services, talked about her growth in her leadership role in working with Kathy and Dr. Provost, and just very down to earth. Also fun that when there were trainings and things that they did at various retreats, et cetera, that she brought a lot of fun and excitement to what they were doing. And we did speak to the chair of the school committee, who talked about what a loss would be for their district, and yet really supported her desire to make the next move and felt without reservation that she was ready. Her transparency and her communication with the school committee was excellent. She had a lot of support from them. That was the last conversation that Dave and I weren't able to, we kind of had some miscommunication on that one. And that's why we couldn't do it together. But we were on the phone calls with people, bringing in great resources, again, not feeding them to staff and support, but really getting staff support around what those schools needed and what would enhance their district. I think David did a lot of the adjectives. I don't disagree with any of them. Union negotiations, she's been involved with all of those. They have more departments because they have more staff, but did interspace bargaining, union negotiations. She was integral in that with the teaching and the paraprofessional unions. I think they did more traditional bargaining with the other unions. They have 4, so talked about that and how great she was in that interest-based bargaining process, which is, again, it's all about communicating group interests and making decisions. So I think there's a lot there. Yeah, that's for just our vetting part. It is interesting because I think we're trying to process, and I'm not criticizing the process at all. But it is interesting if we have teams that speak to one person's qualifications, you know, and then we listen to them. I don't know, but I hope not to be ever doing it again. But if we were to do it again, I wonder if we should have mixed it up. I don't know. It's just a thought. Because you know, we get a perspective.
Okay. Well, I think, and so then the other conversation, I think a number of us have had conversations with administrators, teachers, parents, and heard feedback from them. And a little bit to your point, that tends to be more comparative feedback across them. So I can share just a few input I've gotten from speaking with LEA members, administrators, and parents, and I would say it's fairly consistent across all of them, which is a lot of positive feedback on all 3 candidates, but a significant focus on both Dr. Collins and Dr. Provost's experience and sort of preparedness to sort of step in on day one. And then I think, you know, between the 2 of them, there tends to be a sense that Dr. Collins has more leadership experience. I mean, part of that's just a factual statement, but also that his experience also on that sort of, to the extent you're not a superintendent, the principal is kind of the closest proxy and an important experience that people look for, that he has a lot of as well. And seem to have a sort of very strong track record of leadership, making tough decisions and so forth. And that Dr. Provost particularly stood out in her passion for Lenox and this particular place, and the fit that she clearly felt that she had, but also exhibited with the community and the challenges that were being discussed. And so I think as between those 2, there was no real preference or consensus at all, but a good sense of sort of some of the trade-offs that we probably face between them. That's just from a few conversations.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we heard obviously from all 7 of us had very positive feedback from candidates, and the fact that you mentioned 2, and what I called feedback was that she could step into the superintendent and be better than some of the other people. So I think you guys have done a great job. We have 3 great candidates here. And I, you know, listening to all the feedback, I'm thinking, I think we can make this decision.
Yeah. But were there other administrator conversations and any other themes that anyone want to drop in also?
Yeah, I would say that some of reiterating what I've heard, some similar themes. I think very clearly there was strong support for Dr. Collins and Dr. Provost, and not a concern, but a conveying that Ms. Bonk needs a little bit more of the actual having done some of the things we talked about, and even came up in her review around the budgeting and the administration, and really feeling like, and you know, feeling like she could be ready to hit the ground running. I think there was some hesitation around that. And I think it fits a little bit more with what you were saying, but I did hear some specifics around, you know, a different assistant superintendent might be the perfect. Yeah, not my job to plan someone else's life, but that needing to see the person in that role to get a real sense of what it would look like to have her as a superintendent. And I think that I got that from several different places. So I'm seeing that. And then relative to Dr. Collins and Dr. Provost, I think there was some feeling that her connection, sensitivity, again, not that his was lacking, but was really notable. Her academic focus on her doctoral thesis and some of her work that she's done was a high point, again, very slim between the two of them. And then also her passion for wanting to be in Lenox. I think we heard some feedback that as far as we know, as of right now, this was the place that she applied to, so really wanting to be here. And that's something that when I look at what came from our surveys, you know, and also like really passionate about education, like talking about that as being her passion, you know, champion for education. These were things that came in, you know, collaborative leader, that I think showed up for her. But again, I think we got some similar, I got some similar positives about both with, I think, some focus on her real desire and passion to be here, which experienced a little bit in the conversations we were having over lunch as well. Yeah, so that's just feedback we got, right? Not our own opinion to have. I think I did get some other feedback talking about Dr. Collins being able to show that he's done it versus Dr. Provost having been an assistant. But her reference is really focused on seeing her in those roles collaboratively with the current superintendent.
All right, well, I believe we've arrived at the end of the neutral, just talking about what other people think, portion of the conversation.
Yeah.
I would suggest it's useful to give our initial thoughts at this point and understanding that we then need to talk about it, and if no one changes their mind as we talk about it, there will have been no point in talking about it. But I think sharing initial thoughts is really valuable. I'm more than happy to go first, but also don't want to jump in and go first. So would welcome anybody who wants to share.
I don't know that the order matters, and I wasn't saying I need to go first, but I do think it is important that we hear from every.
Yes, yeah, I think we should start.
Oh, yeah.
By going.
I'll start. Okay, sure. So my preference for a candidate is Dr. Collins. I think listening to Christine kind of talk to his about his references really solidified what I saw and heard from him yesterday. Seems extremely genuine. I truly believe that what you see is what you get with Dr. Collins. His experience speaks to itself. You don't have to kind of question that at all. I also find him extremely calming. He's got a very calming presence about him. Soft-spoken, but clearly has a history of being able to tackle some challenging issues very gracefully with kind of maintaining the, you know, his name as a superintendent. That's not always an easy thing to do. I think something that we've struggled with in Lenox is accountability and ownership in previous administrations. And I think that Dr. Collins would be fantastic with kind of, you know, doing as he says. And like we had heard in his references, there were some examples of handling those kind of incidents. So he's done it before. The experience is there, the character is there. He's made it clear that, you know, he's a man of his word and he will give us he will walk out on us. He's a man of his word. I think he could start tomorrow and be a successful change agent immediately. I think there would be very little training needed for him. I think it would just be him kind of immersing himself in Lenox. I could keep going, but that's just my kind of preference.
Around some direction.
I'll
Go ahead, Christine and then Bob.
Sure.
Okay. I am also going to speak in support of Dr. Collins as my top candidate. I agree with many of the reasons that were listed with Megan. I thought that was actually very well said, Megan. I was thinking of what else I can add to her comments. I think we're in the fortunate position with Dr. Collins of having a candidate in front of us who, by my reckoning anyways, is the most experienced of any of the finalists that we have had in the 4 superintendent searches I have personally participated in. And I very much think this is the moment when we need to take advantage of that experience to help deal with some of the issues that are currently confronting us and that we've been sorting through. I think we would very much benefit from his demonstrated track record in dealing with very similar issues in a similar type of district And he would be able to come in, you know, having dealt with these things before and having a method in mind and approach and you know, not sort of having to puzzle through, well, this is the first time I've seen something and sort of figure out how to handle it. So I think that that's a great asset. It occurred to me also in terms of tenure, how long he would be here. One thing that Berkshire's sometimes attracts, and speaking here from anecdotally from, you know, I feel totally outside of education, but it's often thought of as a nice place to sort of ease into retirement. And I think that's not the kind of, you know, person we want. We actually want somebody who's going to be, you know, totally committed and active and bringing them their full self to the role. And I actually think that we did hear from Dr. Collins that he is looking towards retirement, and this may be his last superintendency, you know, at the end of his career journey. But I actually don't think that he would be a person who is, you know, sort of phoning it in or, you know, gradually fading. I do think we would see him showing that and having that full commitment, which is what we want. And also, you know, the being true to his word really came through. I saw it in the interview and the references, and I think that's very important to me in establishing a foundation of trust, which I think we really need.
Yeah, I actually, I thought that both of those candidates were outstanding. I'm kind of leaning toward Kathleen Provost. But we had great interviews last night. I liked I know she won't have the experience that Dr. Collins has, but I just liked a lot.
Just raise your voice a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just liked a lot of the stuff she's done to improve the Hudson situation. She didn't do it alone. Obviously, she had the superintendent who was very supportive and very helpful in the process. But a lot of the things that she's initiated there, and her core values, which I think probably are similar to the core values of Dr. Collins. I mean, I think that we have people who are student centered. All three of our candidates are very student centered. So anyway, I'm leaning toward Kathleen Provost at this point. And I think I also have that feeling that she might be that we're hoping for somebody who would stay for a while. I had that impression from she's been 17 or 18 years in Hudson, and I think she's not going to want to keep moving.
Very difficult. Very, very difficult. I struggle with this for both the reasons that Dr. Morrow has listed and Mr. Vaughn. If I was to look at this on paper only, I would say that Dr. Collins would hit the ground running, making an assumption that he has the experience that we need. But I'm balancing that with a very strong in-person interview. I felt Dr. Cornwalls. And I try to balance whether an interview was a superintendent's interview to us and an interview from someone who's not yet been a superintendent, yet has all the experience to be one and would be the next step. And therein lies the difficulty. I also feel that Lenox, and this is the real, this is of the 4 past searches the press searches I've been involved in. I feel as though we've had people who have not had superintendent experience. And while looking out of your rear view mirror is, or looking out the back window of your car, you can't really tell where you're going. It still feels to me that it still feels to me that I want someone who can hit the ground running. So I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this because of the fact that I really liked what Dr. Provost had to say. And if I have to make a decision for the good of the district that has been through so much change to this point and needs stability and needs someone who can hit the ground running with experience, I by a hair's breadth, I would lean towards that.
Yeah, I would agree that in my sense, I'm looking, as we said a little earlier, focusing on either Dr. Collins or Dr. Provost, and then looking at a lot of the feedback that I had, her passion for education, for her growth, which we heard a lot about, in her own professionalism in Hudson of taking on the next challenge, and how enthusiastically and somewhat emotionally, the people that had worked with her described her as being collaborative and caring and respectful and wanting to bring the leadership within her district up, I think is something that would really fit well with us. So we certainly did hear from a lot of people that they want someone who is excited about Lenox, who's experienced in being able to make change without making change for its own sake. The DIP, the district improvement plan, I think we've been, even though I was part of the strategic plan, I think we've been a little lacking in the ability to move it from A to B to C. And I think she really demonstrated the methodology that she would take around ensuring that we set goals that are really going to make our district, make Lenox what it really can be and should be. I liked a lot of what I heard about bringing fun and bringing interest and bringing passion to her work. And that influenced me a lot. Her talk about, how she brings in leadership qualities. She works with people who are struggling. We talked a little bit about, some of her influences in education. Her doctorate work, I looked a little bit at some of that, got some input from other people on her scholarship and how that's important to our district. So I'm feeling a lean towards Dr. Provost as well.
I've gone back and forth on this several times, having also gotten to meet them in the preliminary process. I came out of the preliminary interviews leaning toward Dr. Provost. And I've sort of struggled with this exact question of how to weigh the experience against, in a sense, the fit. And I ultimately, especially today, landed more the other direction toward Dr. Collins. And part of it was having a really interesting conversation with a parent who was just sort of interested in the process and how did, we ended up with these candidates, how did we feel about them? And I was trying to convey my enthusiasm that I felt that we had really good candidates. And I realized that in formulating that case, the case for Dr. Collins was just much stronger. That if I go back to how we would have felt when we kicked off this process, I think we would have said, someone like Dr. Provost is the sort of person we would expect to emerge as a top candidate out of the process, and very well might have been chosen against our finalists in any of the other previous processes. If I told you actually there's someone out there who was a beloved Western Massachusetts principal for a decade, left because he was an academic specialist in training principals and superintendents became a superintendent in a district like Lenox, size-wise, with the same responsibilities of superintendent for 5 years, was beloved there, only left because of a long made in advance commitment on the best of terms to sail for a year, and is now available and wants to come here. You guys were sort of laughed at me the same way you laughed when I said, we'll actually get this done by mid-January.
Don't do that.
Like that would have been like, yeah, that's cool that we know that's the sort of candidate we're looking for, but people with that set of experience, but who are leaving the district they're in and aren't trying to move on to another bigger district, but want to come to a district like ours. And to Christine's point, I mean, this is somewhat sort of tactical, but actually important, because he was gone for a while, he still needs a number of years in the Massachusetts system for retirement. He's in the later stages of his career, but he has many years to go. And I think, he didn't convey the same level of passion for Lenox that Dr. Provost did. I think that's certainly true, but I don't want us to make the mistake of just refighting the last battle and say, well, because we had people who weren't passionate enough about Lenox, top passion for Lenox is therefore the criteria. Like, good passionate for Lenox and a desire to be here is important, but over some threshold, I don't think we should choose greatest passion for Lenox over kind of greatest fit or the job we need somebody to do. As last thing I'll say, just because as I was driving over here, I listen exclusively to basketball podcasts, and these debates get very arcane. There was a debate about the 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers, which was like LeBron's best team. But they got wiped out in the finals by the Golden State Warriors the year Kevin Durant was on that team too. And everyone was complaining like that was just really unfair to LeBron. And that just clicked with me, because I think, at least in my mind, whether this is rational or relevant or not, like, this just feels unfair to Dr. Provost to me. Like, she would be a great superintendent for us. Like, if we end up deciding on her, I would be thrilled to have her and work with her. And I think we probably would have chosen her in a prior search, but she's up against this thing that doesn't come along in this kind of search very often. And they think we should grab that most. That's fine.
My turn. Yeah, very tough choice. Dr. Provost was very compelling. I loved her energy, loved her passion, liked her experience very much. To your point, Warren, I think when you stack it up against Dr. Collins, unfortunately, he has the edge there. And the way you phrase that about, hey, somebody came to you and said, we have a person that's this, and this, particularly at our transition point in the district, I do think we have to take advantage of that. And so on with Dr. Collins. I find it really fortuitous that he was graduate coordinator of the leadership program for training principals when we have 2 brand new administrators up in high school. So, that alone is a very compelling argument for me. And then you stack the other accomplishments on there, and it is a lot of experience that I think we can use as sort of a pivotal time in Lennox's turnover and change.
Now, is he also a finalist or just a candidate of the district?
Sorry,
Is he a finalist or?
he
just-
was a finalist in Ware, and they made their decision yesterday for somebody else.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was thinking,
Yeah.
whatever.
So, yeah, that's where we stand at the moment, I think. Open discussion, one place to start might be for folks who are really in for Dr. Provost to talk a little bit more about how they balance the things they see as most important against the things that the college folks are focused on.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because they're both such great candidates and Bill Collins has the experience. I think I was leaning toward Kathleen because of some of the, well, her energy. And I thought she was, very forceful in putting her candidacy forward. But I liked some of the things that she's doing in the district in terms of the leadership, development capacity in her leadership teams were then, doing work, because this is all the stuff that we used to try to do for districts that were struggling. Her district is not struggling the same way some of the districts we were working with was, but she's kind of doing all the things that we could use some help with. She doesn't have the superintendent experience. I was gonna ask her about, legal, because that's an area that, our former superintendent was pretty strong on the legal stuff. Don't know, not everybody comes in having had direct experience. I suspect Dr. Collins does. But I was thinking that, she applied here, maybe she loves Lenox, maybe she doesn't. Dr. Collins was in, at least more than one search because he undoubtedly wants to get back to this area. And I'm happy that he wasn't chosen in the other district because that leaves him open for us. If that's the direction we go, but I just had the feeling that Kathleen might be a really long-term person. Maybe slightly more than Dr. Collins, although as you mentioned, I would look at the years of experience. I looked at that too. And I don't have a clue whether that's something that he's thinking about, because he had a lot of years to get to whatever. But
One of the things is one of our subcommittee persons just put together a document that was a summary. We shared the survey, we shared a lot of the bullet points of the community forums that we had. And, in the top 5 were champion for education, collaborative leader, engage with a vision of growth, committed to educating the whole child, experienced professional, able to navigate complex organizational relationships. The 6th was public school educator, but I think it was like, whether we want someone coming from university or private school, that came up. But on 15 was previous superintendent experience. And I think that way that we say, can we have a leader who can show they can do all the things, and do they have to be a prior superintendent? Because again, sometimes in a small district, we don't get a lot of those applications. So for me, the top 5 with the champion, collaborative, engaged with vision for growth, committed to education, came really, really through with Kathleen. That's Dr. Provost. That's why I'm leaning toward her. I really do think that they're close, and I really do see that we're in at this point, we're not counting it as a vote, but in our first inclination, we're kind of in a 5-2, and I think I can see that, and I'm not gonna. I can support Dr. Collins. I really would love the opportunity to have had someone like Dr. Provost in our district with us and showing us that she can do all the things that she can do. The people that spoke about her had no reservations of her ability to do it and do it here, and do it wonderfully, and be someone that we would really care about. Did hear some feedback of the way she immediately jumped into some of her conversations today with, tell me about you, tell me about Lenox, tell me, and so that shows some of her communication style. But, I think I certainly understand what we've been through and needing to have that leadership as a strength. I was really moved also by sort of the Choose Love program. It doesn't mean that we can't choose the Choose Love program. Doesn't come with the person. That's a program that's available, but the way in which I can see that community like Lenox could use some skill around how we build that understanding also of understanding other cultures. She spoke to the understanding other cultures and seeing the ways in which diversity can show up in lots of different ways, and I feel like supporting teacher growth and community growth around that is really important, and something she talked about a lot, both in the first interview and this interview, and came up a lot in her evaluation. So those are some of my things. That's still kind of, that's my tip. But if we're gonna include the process, you know, we're toward the idea of Dr. Collins, because there's some strong feeling about that. I can
And I can
I
certainly.
can ultimately register my vote.
Something to consider, Ronnie, as we have discussed, the need in the past for a curriculum. You know, there may be some other options to get.
I had the-
Provost in the district.
I had the impression that curriculum wise. Kathleen might be stronger. I also liked her response about getting to know all the faculty, which of course I think. Any of these candidates would, I don't think that was the case with our previous. Superintendent, but also knowing most students, now she's in a 2,500 student district, that would be hard to imagine, but a lot of those would have been students that she would have worked with over the years, so she probably knows some of the older ones, you know. But, you know, we have 800 students, you know, I like that. You know, I had a good feeling, but I could definitely support Dr. Collins' if that's the direction we go. Just don't want to lose it. That's the hard. That's the hard part. You can only take one person.
Well, I guess in maybe the second question we're thinking about is for folks who were leaning toward Dr. Collins. And it was obviously a very close call, I think, by just about everybody. Are there things that you want to explore further on that side that would incline to still be more provost doing it?
What do you mean?
Well, if.
I think the curriculum.
Sorry.
No, sorry. For folks, I mean, I don't think anyone's like, you know. Provost isn't a plausible choice, and so if there's someone who's thinking, one thing that would incline me to actually. Shift toward Dr. Provost would be X, that would be the other thing to really focus on. If there isn't anything that would lead folks to shift that way, then we sort of are where we are, I think.
I do have one question, and it's funny in a way because the job officially starts, you know, would start officially July 1st, but we would love to have some leadership transition sooner. I don't know whether, you know, we're not usually at that place to explore that, and my sense is that because her entire team knows that's what she's going for, and they're all supporting her, that she might be able to come on sooner. I mean, obviously, it might be unfair for me to speculate about that, but the nature of our conversations, we're suggesting that everybody that she knows that this is what she wants, and they're very supportive. So, is there a way in which, if she could come on sooner, that would be something that would have us feel like we have a lot of other decisions to make, a principal to search for. We're grateful for Jake. I'm not in any way saying we don't want him here, but he rearranged his professional life to help us, and I'm very appreciative of that. So, you know, if it makes a difference that we could start someone sooner than July 1st, there may be some weight to that, but maybe that's too speculative at this point, because that's not a conversation we've had.
No, it isn't, but I think with Dr. Collins, I think it might be potentially very likely since he's not currently employed.
Right, that's what I say. I think actually, feedback I got from one of the administrator conversations was that would be a possibility. So I think that's
For him?
certainly, yeah, for her.
For her.
So I
yeah,
think that's certainly
yeah.
a fair thing to raise,
And
that's not just speculative.
Get through the box.
For him, it's more speculative, but it would come down to a sailing schedule question,
Well,
so.
and his commitment to a year sabbatical, which I also
Yeah.
respect, and I'm not in any way trying to denigrate that, or suggest that that's not very, very important. He spoke passionately about why that was important. I respect that a lot. So, yeah.
That's a fair point to bring up. I do. I think I mean, Dr. Provost was fantastic. I think she would make a fantastic superintendent. I think Lenox would be lucky to have her, but for me, I was pretty strong with Dr. Collins all along. And for me, that wouldn't, even if, you know, she could start tomorrow, I don't think that would trump my decision. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's good.
Well, I'm gonna just hand things back over to the chair then.
Yeah, so at this point, a motion would be in order to make it work.
And actually, well, one other thing, I was speaking with LaFawn, our MASC rep about this today, and one thing she emphasized is that it's quite typical to actually do two votes. That is, that the initial motion is to offer the position to person so and so, pending successful contract negotiation, with an understanding that if that's not someone's first choice, they shouldn't feel compelled to vote yes for that for the sake of unanimity, because you can follow it up with a immediate second motion, expressing support for the selection of so and so as the superintendent. And so I just didn't know that and found it interesting. So wanted to.
Yeah,
just
well,
note it.
when we did this before, they said that it's nice if it can be a unanimous vote. It may come on the first vote.
To some degree, we've done sort of an informal version of that, so that we have a
Right.
sense of where everyone is, and nobody's far apart on this, so maybe.
We had great candidates. And made the decision difficult, but we support one.
Well, I will move that we offer the position of superintendent to for Lenox Public Schools to Dr. William Collins.
And make successful.
Subject.
Pending
Subject to successful
contract.
contract negotiation. Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay,
Subject to successful contract negotiation.
So. You got,
From the top,
do you want
Oh, the
to?
top, sorry, I didn't hear you. So I move that we offer the position of superintendent for Lenox Public Schools to Dr. William Collins. Subject to successful contract negotiation.
and it was seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
And with that, we should recess so that you can give them a call.
I would like to
And
thank
do
the
we go to-
committee for all the diligent and hard work.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you all.
That's worth much, I think this process was admirably smooth, fast, thoughtful, yeah,
And good candidates.
very much appreciated.
And I will just echo that the three of us worked really hard together, and Orin created a system and a structure that was organized, moved us forward, and also made sure that people had the opportunity to be heard, especially in our confidential subcommittee. And we had a broad group of stakeholders, and I think it was really great to hear from all of them, and everybody had a chance to put their voice.
I can't say enough how we had a fantastic search committee. I think everybody was extremely effective at what they did. We got a lot done in a short period of time, even though I thought Warren was a little crazy, but we're here, we did it. But the search committee was fantastic. A joy to work with, really, really great people.
Yeah, I'm very thankful. And lastly, I should first of all acknowledge the administration that
Thank you.
has been participating in the search committee, gave feedback at every stage, allowed us to turn the schools upside down for the last 2 days with the final iteration of Orin being crazy. And I know gave positive, all the candidates I think have really enjoyed their time with us. And finally to Liz LaFond, who
Yes.
wisely avoided the weather this evening, but is with us on Zoom and is an extraordinary supporter and consultant and advisor in everything we do. But I really got to work with her a lot on this.
Such a breadth of knowledge.
Yeah, would not have done it without her.
Yeah,
So
it's great.
that's the team.
So do we adjourn?
We recess
We recess, and then we
if,
are going into executive
and then
session.
we'll, end with an executive session to go over some of the contract stuff.
So we recess. Like you. God bless you. Thank you all.
Oh, so
We're back.
Okay, so we're back in public session and we're announcing to everybody that we've selected Dr. William Collins as our next superintendent, and he has accepted position subject to negotiations, but that was our vote. He accepted. So, and I told him that we would be having further discussions the next day.
If I can, it's okay, I want to express extreme gratitude for Dr. Kathleen Provost and Deanna LeBlanc for just spending a lot of time with us and putting themselves out there and seeking to be part of Lenox. Really, this decision is not a reflection of them, and really very, very appreciative of the time we spent together. And thanking them for their time and energy. It's very important.
Very well said.
Hard decisions.
That's a great point, and I think we were been talking during the recess. They would both be people that we could have them in Lenox someday. I think we'd be thrilled, so.
Yes. And wonderful commitments to education, which is good for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Okay, I need a vote to move to executive session for the purpose of MGL chapter 30A, section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel.
Did you need us to actually, someone actually read that motion, because I now I didn't print it out. Okay, so I move that we adjourn to executive session for the purposes of Mass General Law, chapter 30A, section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel without the intent to return.
I second the motion.
Roll call.
Warren Cass, aye.
Ron Patton, aye.
David Rimmer, aye.
Bob Juan, aye.
Christine Mara, aye.
Megan Kirby, I.
Top much,
And with that, we say goodbye. to our Zoom visitors.
Still have a few people with us. Thank you.